Welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're digging into a totally fascinating mystery that sits right at the intersection of human empathy and the raw, harsh biology of the wild. When you or I see an animal in distress, our immediate instinct is usually to help, right? But what's actually going on inside that animal's head? Are we having this incredible cross-species moment of understanding? Or are we just projecting our own human emotions onto a creature that is literally terrified for its life?
Okay, so let's jump right in by establishing the baseline reality here. Every single wild animal out there carries a threat assessment that is just constantly running in the background. It's evaluating the speed of an approach, the direction, the eye contact, and this calculation happens way faster than conscious thought. The output? It's almost always the exact same. Get far away from the human. And this isn't something they learn, by the way. This threat response is inherited. It's encoded so deeply that it runs even in species that have never seen a human being before in their entire lives. Now picture this. That animal gets trapped. The second a wild animal loses its physical ability to move, its body goes into a state that doesn't really have a human equivalent. It's an absolute biological nightmare. Cortisol instantly floods the bloodstream. Adrenaline skyrockets to levels that would actually be lethal if they stayed that high for more than a few minutes. Their heart rate doubles, and then it literally doubles again. The whole system just totally redlines.
To put this in perspective, a study in the European Journal of Wildlife Research found something absolutely wild. Hoofed animals like deer caught in fencing actually show higher cortisol concentrations than animals that were injured by a gunshot or hit by a car. Think about that for a second. Being stuck is measurably worse for them than being shot. Their body is burning through every single reserve it has, firing off every emergency alarm at once, and preparing for the only two options it knows: fight or wait to die.
If you're looking at this from the outside, this kind of extreme trauma has a very specific, visceral look. The animal's pupils are totally blown wide open. Their muscles aren't just jittery or tense, they're locked, rigidly locked, like a body that is completely committed to a single, final outcome. Their breathing is incredibly fast and shallow. Wildlife rehabilitators often describe this as the animal going somewhere else. They're physically there, but mentally, they are completely consumed by the immediate, overwhelming threat of dying.
So imagine you walk onto the scene. You're walking toward this trapped creature with the best intentions. But that animal, it doesn't see a hero. It sees an apex predator arriving at the absolute worst possible moment. Just your physical proximity triggers the final phase of a hunt in the animal's brain. And that is exactly why their frantic thrashing gets so much more violent the closer you get. It is burning its absolute last drops of energy on the only defense its evolutionary history has ever taught it.
But then, in some of these rescue encounters, something totally unexpected happens. There's this weird anomaly. The thrashing just stops. And it's not because they're exhausted. It's something eerie and much more deliberate. That rigid, locked-up body softens, even if just a tiny fraction. The frantic pulling completely ceases, and the animal actually orients itself, not struggling away but actually toward the human. It just holds its position and it watches. Why on earth do they stop fighting? Well, it all comes down to threat pattern recognition. A predator coming in for the kill moves fast. They take a direct line, showing aggressive tracking eye contact. But a human, trying to help, we move totally differently. We move slowly. We try not to make sudden gestures. We mess with the trap itself, not the animal. Because eye movements don't match any known pattern in their millions of years of evolutionary programming, the animal's brain basically searches its whole threat database and it comes up empty.
Let me give you an incredible real-world example of this from December 2005. A female humpback whale was found horribly entangled about 18 miles off the coast of San Francisco. The ropes were wrapped completely around her mouth, her pectoral fins, and her tail. She had 12 heavy crab traps, each weighing 90 pounds, hanging off her body and physically dragging her down. She was fighting non-stop just to keep her blowhole above the surface so she wouldn't drown. Now, just to really grasp the stakes here, you have to picture the sheer, terrifying scale of this creature. We are talking about 50 feet of muscle, weighing 50 tons. 4 rescue divers went into the water with curved knives to try and free her. A single reflexive thrash of her tail would have instantly killed any one of them. But contrasting that massive, lethal power was this incredibly delicate stillness she chose to hold while these absolute strangers swam around her.
Her response was just unbelievable. The exact moment the divers hit the water, she stopped moving. For over an hour, she just held her position at the surface. She actually deliberately repositioned herself. She'd rotate, extend a fin, adjust her angle, specifically to give the divers better access to the lines they were trying to cut.
And when they finally sliced the last rope, she didn't just bolt. She swam in wide circles and gently nudged each individual diver with her jaw before finally swimming away.
One of those rescue divers, James Mosquito, said that nudge felt like gratitude. And, as humans, we naturally gravitate toward that emotional interpretation, right? It's a beautiful idea. But scientists are always extremely cautious about throwing around words like gratitude when talking about animal behavior, especially right after a state of extreme physiological stress, which is notoriously tricky to interpret objectively.
But here's the really cool part where the biology backs this up. Humpback whales actually have something called spindle neurons. These are highly specialized brain cells linked to empathy and rapid social decision-making. Humans have them, great apes have them, elephants have them. So while we can't definitively prove she was feeling grateful in the human sense, she absolutely has the actual neurological hardware required to process that kind of complex social emotion.
Okay, let's switch gears and see how this looks in a totally different setting. Out in Yellowstone, researchers came across a wolf caught in a leg-hold trap. Exactly as biology dictates, the wolf was lunging and snapping ferociously at anyone who got near. But then, one of the researchers just stopped moving. They stood still and held steady, non-aggressive eye contact with the wolf. Because sustained eye contact without an attack completely breaks the standard predator rulebook, it essentially short-circuited the wolf's panic.
Experts call this the suspension of threat response. The brain's alarm system doesn't necessarily turn off, it just sort of loses its target. The attack it's bracing for never comes, so the crisis response has nothing to latch onto. After a few minutes of this, the wolf literally just sat down. It calmly watched the researchers work on the trap, and when it was finally freed, it just stood there, looked directly at the researcher, and calmly trotted off into the trees.
Which brings us to what might be the most mind-blowing evidence of post-rescue awareness: elephants. In Kenya, wildlife teams frequently have to pull juvenile elephants out of these deadly mud pits, and they exhibit this incredibly fascinating behavior once they're freed. Before they walk away to safety, they will often deliberately make physical contact with the people who just saved them, gently resting their trunks against a rescuer's hand or arm.
To understand how big of a deal that is, you have to keep this number in mind: 40,000. That is roughly the number of individual muscles in an elephant's trunk. It is their primary sensory organ, absolutely packed with nerve endings. So when an elephant deliberately reaches out and rests that trunk on a human for a few seconds, it is definitely not some random nervous twitch. It is a highly complex, deliberate, and gentle sensory examination.
And look, we already know elephants are ridiculously smart. They mourn their dead, they recognize their own reflections in mirrors, and they carry complex social memories for decades. They even return to the exact same spots years later to touch the bones of their lost companions. So they undoubtedly possess the brain power to tell the difference between a human who showed up to hurt them and a human who just ended their nightmare. But here is where things really push the edge of what science can currently explain. We see documented cases of elephants just standing near their rescuers for minutes after being released. Think about it. The threat is gone. The trap is open. There is zero biological reason for them to hang around a potential predator. They aren't running away, and they aren't looking for food. They are just choosing to stay present with the humans who helped them. So what do we actually know for sure? Well, the data proves that animals definitely suspend their threat responses when humans break the typical predator mold. We know that some species go out of their way to make deliberate physical contact after a rescue, and we know these specific actions serve basically no obvious survival purpose. As our tracking technology and neuroimaging get better, our understanding of these incredible moments is only going to grow. But even with all of our amazing tech, there's still a boundary we just can't cross yet. Science can measure the cortisol dropping, it can document the threat response stalling out, but it can't tell us what it actually feels like inside those encounters. We don't really know what it's like to be that wolf pausing at the tree line, or the whale gently nudging the diver in the freezing ocean. It's this beautiful, lingering mystery. Which leaves us with this final, really profound question. When these wildly powerful animals pause after a rescue just to look at us or to touch us, does it actually mean something to them? Or are we humans just running our own pattern recognition, projecting our own deep desire for connection back onto the wild? It's something really worth thinking about. Thanks for hanging out with me on today's Explainer, and remember to always keep your curiosity alive.